Hello, my name is Preston Blevins, and I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight to sit in on a very important and critically needed presentation on monitoring your mission critical supply chains. The speaker, Cynthia Kalina Kaminsky, is an individual that I met about 9 months ago, and I've had many conversations, and I thought I'd introduce her just by talking about my impressions as opposed to something that you've read already in the bio on the event listing. These are the things that impress me about her. One, she has a lot of experience in dealing and managing complex manufacturing systems, and that probably stems from her background and where she started, which was industrial engineering. And industrial engineers kind of know the flow and the interconnections between a human and machinery and doing things in the right sequence and the importance of uninterrupted flow and all that stuff. So they really get a sense of the heartbeat of a manufacturing enterprise. So that impressed me. Plus, she had some background in aerospace and defense. And also, we had discussions about disruptions in supply chains today. And I think they've been extraordinary. I don't think I've ever seen a time where we've had this many disruptions. And in our discussions, it really was instigated by her knowledge of the one framework that is known to really stabilize and prepare for disruptions like this, and that's SCOR. And that stands for the Supply Chain Operational Reference Framework. And she's an expert in that. In fact, she's a master instructor in that. And SCOR, really, in a system of things, is at the very tip of a hierarchy or a pyramid of tools and methodologies that, as a practitioner in supply chain and operations management, you can deploy. It's the really analytical and design and planning stage, the highest level possible, where you really get to see whether something's feasible and how to make things work smoothly as you go down into more complicated and detailed planning. So she's very much expert, master instructor. And one of the other things that really got me, because today I've suffered through in my life many lectures that I had trouble staying awake through, but she's really into what I would call adult learning, where the student is the centerpiece. You want the student to learn and to retain what's being taught. And so she's very student centric, more almost like a mentor than a traditional lecturer. And you'll see that in the way she presents things today. And she also believes in quick wins. And again, this is gleanings, my observations over 9 months of conversations. And one of the things that really drew us together to have a conversation was her commitment to eco-sustainability. She is actually doing in her personal life all the things that we need to do, both at the civic and within manufacturing operations. She's not only talking the talk, she's walking the talk. So without any further delay, and by the way, I would recommend that you take notes and get focused, because there'll be a lot of takeaways from this presentation tonight. But without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Cynthia.
Thank you, Preston, for such a lovely introduction. Thank you. And I want to thank the San Diego ASCM for inviting me. If you haven't taken a look at their web pages where they show their eco-sustainability information and all of the events that they're having, please take a look at it. It is amazing. What we're going to be doing tonight, and before I go any farther, my internet occasionally is showing me that I have unstable internet, so I may turn my camera off. I'm not leaving you. I'm just making sure that you can still hear me, but I just wanted to let you know I might do that just to keep everything moving. But we're going to be looking at who's really watching your supply chains, because there are a lot of questions and you may really not know who it is who's actually looking. We've got some general suspects, but we're going to go through some and just take a look at what they're demanding of us when they're looking over our shoulders. So I thought we'd start out by looking at Pat's Pollinator Pathways. This is a little made up company, but what they do, both of these are Pat's, and they are there to figure out how to connect all of the pollinator pathways so we don't have islands of pollinators. They actually can migrate and have the food sources and everything else that they need, the sustainment, and not be killed along the way. But so they're looking at creating one yard after another, linking together, having the native plants. What you can't see here is behind their little store, they've got a greenhouse. They're growing the native plants for the area that then they sell. They're training kids. They're working with the governments to get those government areas actually planting the native plants, being the example for the communities, working with commercial entities to do the same thing. And while you see them running around with their nets, they're not there to grab those beautiful butterflies and pin them to a board. They're actually looking at getting some and then capturing the eggs and making sure they're distributing them so that, again, more pollinators, more pathways, more possibilities of survival, which is needed. I can't remember if it's the East Coast monarch or the West Coast monarch, but they're 86% extinct. So there's a lot of help that's needed because we can't live without the pollinators. So this is their business that they've set up, and they've won a lot of awards. They get a lot of recognition, and yet they're rain clouds. They don't know what's going on. It just feels like something's not correct. Right. There's something that they can't put their finger on. They don't know how to explain it, even with all these great things that they're doing. And they do have a franchise and they're franchised out. Every one of the franchises works with the local areas. So there's all sorts of great things going on, but something's not right. And we're going to help them figure it out today. Here they are again, looking at all of the things they do. And even with increasing sales, there seems to be this shadow over everything. And it almost seems like there's someone watching over their shoulder, but they're not quite sure how to start to put it into a frame of reference. So before we go any farther, I thought I'd introduce myself. I am Dr. Cynthia Kalina-Kaminsky. I have spent time in industry, and in my very first job, on the very first day, I was taken out to the factory and I was told, we're really glad you're here because you need to make the factory globally competitive. And from that time on, I've been in transformation. So I still do that with my consulting company. I work a lot with the very large companies around the globe doing transformational work with their supply chains, which means transformational work for the business itself. Because one of the things that you never hear a VC talk about is really the operational aspects. They'll talk about the great marketing plans, they'll talk about the great products, but you can actually redesign, or you can copy all of that. You can deconstruct it and repeat it on your own. You cannot steal well-designed supply chains. I'm going to show you how that's actually possible. And it's because it integrates so many things that you have that are unique, but most people just don't know how to integrate them yet. That's what I'm here to help you with today. I do that with all the other companies that I work with and the clients. I did start, as Preston said, in solar design. That was my BS in engineering. But when I got out, they said, energy's cheap. Why do we need you? Now, we might want to ask the state of California, where a lot of you are sitting, why would you need someone like me? The answer is now sort of understandable, but at the time it wasn't. So I went into the tech end. And now we're seeing a merging of the tech as well as the climate aspects. And you'll see that throughout tonight as we go through. In all of this, though, what I've always looked at is the transformation, the optimization, and the integration. And that's what we're going to be looking at, because the people looking over your shoulder, they're probably not the usual people you look at. So what I want you to do first is just to give me some idea of your understanding of what is holding back true corporate sustainability efforts. And you'll see at the top of the page, if you open a different tab in your computer, you can go to polev.com/Cynthia Collin 921. It'll ask you to sign in. You don't have to, just press continue and type in your answer. Or if you want to sign in, that's fine. Everything is anonymous. I just want what it is that you're seeing is holding us back from going full force ahead. You can also use your smartphone and you can text Cynthia Collin 921 to I think it's 22333. It happens to be underneath the little Zoom piece, so I hope I have it memorized correctly. Let me know if you have any trouble getting in. And Amanda, I'm going to have you watch the chat for me, please. True understanding of the challenges. Excellent. Yes. Because most people have a different definition of sustainability than the next person. Lack of verified data. Oh, we're going to talk about data a lot. So that's an excellent one. Education of the key players. Yes. All right. So I am going to wait just a couple more seconds and then we'll move on. These are outstanding, straightforward, standardized solutions. Oh, you're talking to me now. And not enough awareness or understanding of ROI. Yes, ROI, because we always have to have the data to be able to show that this is actually making sense for us. So excellent, excellent input. I'm going to go on now. So what we want to understand is, well, just who is watching our supply chains, because if we understand who's watching our supply chains, we're going to understand what they're watching for. And if we don't take that extra piece of data, then we may miss something critical and end up having to redo a whole bunch of critical aspects of our business and our supply chains just because we didn't understand it up front. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with Greta Thunberg. Now, she is a social activist. She started at the age of 15, getting people excited about protecting and supporting and being at the forefront of cheering the movements to protect and support our environment and the climate. She's looking at not only next century, like a lot of people are continue to say, or 2050 because it's too far out, or 2040 because that's still too far out. But she knows the 2030 is a critical time frame. We've got 8 years. No, we don't even have that maybe until 2030. And it's not just her generation anymore. It's not just kicking the can down the road, it's us. So we need to all be a part of this. And she took it upon herself at 15 to actually go. She talked to the UN. She's won a Nobel Peace Prize. She has shown everyone that your determination matters and it makes differences, because we can see that now board activists are starting to demand, even of our largest companies in fossil fuel areas, that they start to do more than lip service to climate change, to what is required to actually start to protect this gift that we've been given. And while there's a lot more we can talk to on any of these slides, I'm going to continue going on because there's a lot more that we've got, a lot more people, a lot more entities looking over our shoulders, such as finance@yahoo.com. Who would have thought, right? It's just an online area where you can go check your stock prices. Well, what's actually going on now is that they have their own ESG measurement, and they are putting together groups of companies and comparing them against each other and saying where they believe they stand on the environmental front. How good are they in each of these different aspects? It's a different measurement than any of the other measurements we'll be talking about, but it is a measurement. And now your retail investors are going to come in and look at your company and say, do I want to invest in you? Because I'm concerned about ESG. And if you're not doing anything for the E part, the environmental part, then maybe I'll go to your competitor. So this is stuff now that we have to make sure our executives understand, because it's not just someone out there doing something that we don't have to mind about anymore. This is affecting the investment in our company, and that starts to get ears tuned the way we need to have them tuned. One thing that research is showing that is that when people talk about ESG, the majority of them, over 60%, are only talking about the social aspect. This is the equality of pay, the diversity in the workforce. All of those are important, but none of them talk to the environmental, or I should say very few, very low percentage talk and do anything about the environmental at this point in time. So ESG to most people just means social. So what the San Diego chapter is doing is extremely important, getting that information out in a way everyone can understand, because it's not just the retail investors, it's the professional investors too. Now, BlackRock has been looking at this since before 2018. But in 2018, they said, you'd better have a plan. Otherwise, you don't get to come into our portfolio. And they've got a lot of nice dollars sitting around waiting to be invested. And a lot of companies want some of that investment. In fact, it's not just limited to BlackRock. It's a lot of the investment companies now have seen that there's great return on the investments that they're making. But it's not just the fact that you have a plan anymore. Now you have to show that you are executing throughout your company. Otherwise, you don't get those investment dollars. Well, great. So we've got Greta Thunberg and other social activists demanding that we act in certain ways, but we're not quite sure how to measure any of those or make them real. We've got Yahoo at finance@yahoo.com and other types of evaluations of how our company is doing on the ESG scale, but none of them are really the same and measure the same thing. And how do we use it in our companies anyway? Now we've got the professional investment firms saying that they want to see execution. Execution on what? So there are more questions being raised by companies who want to do something than we have answers for right now. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you in limbo the whole time. We're going to get there. But there's a little more to this. When you start talking about the investment in a company, the CFO sits up and starts paying attention. Now, typically in a supply chain, right, the CFO and the supply chain people tend to butt heads a little bit, because we've got different ways of looking at the exact same thing. Neither is right, neither is wrong. They're all important aspects. We have to figure out how to merge them. But what has happened is that now the chief financial officers are getting phone calls and text messages and everything else from shareholders who want to know, what are you doing about this aspect? What are you going to do to handle this risk that we're seeing over here? And other people are saying, well, you're putting out all of this great information. Cisco Systems, one of the entities that I really like what they're doing, because they're strong in their environmental aspects. They truly take it to heart. They truly have things going on. But because there are so many others who have figured out a way to greenwash, which is a word we hear all the time, it starts to place a shadow over even those companies that are doing great things. So how do we know who to trust, who not to trust if we're not well educated in them? How do we keep the shadow off of us if we are doing great things? And if we are doing great things, how do we figure out how to get the people who aren't, but who are competitors, somehow to play on an even playground? Because it does take work and it does take investment. There's a lot that you get in as a return, but you can't get away without the first part. So now we've got the chief financial officers wanting to know how in the world they can start to solve and answer these questions on sustainability and on climate related disclosure. In other words, and again, the San Diego chapter has some training on materiality. What are the material risks that these companies are going to start to face? And how do we, in an organized, standardized way, start to figure out how to take care of them? Because we can't introduce chaos. We're running too fast. We've got plenty of chaos as it is. So tell me if this sounds like any of the companies that you're familiar with. Just put them into chat, say yes or no. And Amanda, if you could tell me what's coming up. If you go down to the bottom of the toolbar, there's a little chat circle bubble that'll come up. Just click on that and you'll be able to enter something into chat.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Okay, so are you seeing any confusion over what in the world is going on? How do we why should we even do this? Because we can't compare ourselves. What's the meaning behind anything that we put out? So are you seeing any of these questions bubble up in any of the companies that you help or that you're with?
Amira said yes, lots of confusion.
And I'll wait just a couple seconds in case anyone else wants to just put in a yes or a no.
Mark said, not sure about confusion, but inflation isn't helping.
Yes, true. So many things we get to deal with. Excellent. And that confusion, I'm sorry?
Preston just said only 23% have sustainability as a risk.
Which is problematic too, because you've got your shareholders calling the CFO saying, what are you going to do about it? And we're like, hey, it's not a risk to us. And so all of a sudden there's a disconnect inside the company, as well as now, how in the world do we answer all these questions to the external parts, to the shareholders, the stakeholders. So you're right. There is a lot of confusion, but we're not done uncovering everything that's going on, because people are trying to get some organization around this. And we just answered, what are you thinking about all of this? So I'm going to skip this question. So our company said, well, great, I don't know how to solve this, but other people have already put a lot of thought into it. We're going to go to the UN and we're going to look at their Sustainable Development Goals. Now, these are 17 goals that are shared around the world, and they picked out 10 of them and said, yeah, we either directly or indirectly are doing stuff with that. So, these might be something we need to look at. But as I thought more about it, it's like, whoa, that's way too big for our company. We're starting to enter into the middle market, but we can't handle all of this. We just don't have the resources. So one thing about sustainability is that you start where you can, and then you build from there. You don't have to do it all at once. So they chose what it was that made sense for them now, because they were already doing things in all of these areas. And then they went back into the UN stuff and said, great, now how do we measure it? And they found that, well, there really wasn't any measurement. There's no real framework. There's just questions. And even more confusing, this is all for countries. Well, how do you, as a business, do something that there's only discussion at the country level? You create country policies and pass laws and legislation. We're not doing that. So they had to go and look a few other places for some of what it was that they needed to do, even though they knew that somehow they had to fit into this UN set of goals, because it was being looked at around the world. So they went to GRI. Now, GRI has been around for a long time. It's a global reporting initiative, and companies voluntarily come in and give them their sustainability, their environmental metrics. And what GRI has is they've broken down things into a group for GHG, greenhouse gas emissions. And you would look at your carbon, and you would look at tons of carbon. And they have something for water, and you would look for how much less water you use this year than compared to last year, and you measure it according to gallons of water or whatever it is. So they've got some general ways of looking at it, but they're not specific. I don't know if I use that greenhouse gas measurement, am I going to be starting and stopping where I take my measurement from the same way someone else is? Is it truly an apples to apples comparison? And then you've got the problem that for a long time, entities use GRI as greenwashing. They put up metrics as a marketing exercise, and they couldn't verify them. They could not support them. Now, GRI has since changed their standards and said, no, when you put up a metric, we can call on you at any time, and you'd better have the proof right there. So they have now put in that you have to support what the metrics are that you're putting forward. So an effort to get rid of that taint of greenwashing that came in. But still, are you satisfied? Put in chat, yes or no. Are you satisfied that we have enough answered that you feel for your company we could go in and do something right away tomorrow that's benchmarkable against your competitors?
Amira said not sure, which probably means no.
Do you know enough? And yeah, we sort of, it's sort of tough. And Homero, I'm going to feel, I feel your pain because I didn't explain all the details. Way too long for a 40-minute presentation. But you're on the right track. If you can't feel that you've got a framework in here to work from that's going to stay stable, then why would you commit all of those resources in your company? Because you've got to be careful what you're putting out there. Your competitors are looking, right? And they're going to try to match and beat what you're doing. So you've got to figure out a way to do this in a way that your customers trust you at all times and they don't look at you in a questioning manner. Are you really, really doing this? So, okay. So we're going to say, let's do a little more on the framework. Let's do a little more on the standardization of things. And what happened was the CFOs needed something. And there are groups of people who band together in various trade groups, sort of like ASCM, but these are for boards of directors. Public companies have their board of directors trained, and those boards of directors also have committees that put out reports and put out guidance to the directors in public companies on how they should handle certain things. Now, over the past couple years, the boards of directors that have had as their number one topic ESG. But when they first started looking at it, again, just like you guys, well, I'm not quite sure what to do. How in the world do I start to even get these answers created so that I'm not causing more chaos and not hurting myself in the process? So in 2017, they came out with the climate related financial disclosures. All of these are financial disclosures. You'll put them on your 8K, which you hand in the US quarterly to the SEC. You'll put them in on your 10K, which you hand in annually to the SEC. Both of these are investor pieces where a reasonable investor can read it and understand all of the risks so they can decide whether to invest in you or not. And so what we're doing is we're uncovering some of these climate related risks and putting them in financial terms because they have very material aspects, very material risks that may apply to the revenue of the company or to the way the supply chains run, right? Our ability to deliver when an order is placed. So they're trying to get some sort of framework here. And this was their first start, and here's their second. Guidance on metrics, targets, and transition plans. Well, that sounds an awful lot like supply chain and industrial engineering and continuous improvement, but supply chain never showed up at the table. In fact, when I show these to people, I have yet to meet a supply chain professional who knew of these and knew that they were in the background, because what they're doing is they're educating the boards. The boards are now pushing on the executive management and the C-suite, and they're being told they have to flow this through the entire company, and supply chain isn't at the table. So the reason why I'm telling you this is that you have to get to the table, because we need to make sure all viewpoints are represented so that when we put something in, we're not fighting ourselves all the time. So we've got metrics and targets starting to be put forward as to what we should be doing. And on top of it, we've got implementation. So all three of these are in the lead page, for lack of a better word. It's where you can download the content. And Amanda will be putting that into the chat box. You don't have to get it during this presentation. You can get it afterwards because it'll stay active. But you can go and get all of these. Because of the fear of bots, it's set up so that you sign in with your email address and you can download all of these. And now you are as educated as your board of directors are on what they're trying to get the finance people to bring into the company and flow through it. And you get to now say, and from a supply chain point of view, here's what it really looks like. But in many instances, we don't really know what it looks like yet, because we've got the UN sort of vague for the country. We've got the GRI sort of vague, but they're at least telling us the little categories that we need to be concerned about, but we don't have standardized metrics. So because all of the board of directors pieces, even though it's spreading throughout the US, those are all voluntary. The SEC said, you know what? We need to get this under control because these are material risks to the company and we can't ignore them anymore anywhere in our company, including in the supply chains. So on the left, you'll have the first page of their 500-page rule proposal. That public comment period just ended in June on this. And now the SEC is going back and looking at all the comments and looking at the rules, which were based on the documents that I just showed you. It's all about greenhouse gases at this point in time. It's all based on what the boards of directors have already put together because that's all they had to go off of, right? Out of industry at this point in time. So again, we need to get to the table. While we can't comment on it, we can know what's coming up. And so you'll get this 3-page fact sheet when you look at that lead page and go looking for content. What I want to show you is that there are some very distinct results that the SEC has put in there looking for itself. So here, they've got different categories of people who are public companies, not people, companies that are public companies. A large accelerated filer is a company that has at least 700 million out in public stock. That's not very much. The second tier is 75 million to 700 million in publicly available stock, whether it's owned by investors already or it's free to be bought. And then these small recording companies are less than 100 million. So you can see there's some overlap here, but let's take a look at what they're expecting out of us. Scope 1, that's who we are. Us as the company, we have control over our stuff. We're going to now have to report, again, grab those documents from the boards of directors because we're going to have to report on greenhouse gases. And there are metrics that are going to be proposed on how we report those. And we're going to have to get those in place in fiscal year 2023, as in next year, as in less than 4 months from now, because you're going to file it in 2024. Now, we don't even have the rulings from the SEC yet, and they're saying here's when everything's due. For scope 1, which is us, everything we can control, and scope 2, this is our energy buy. Are we buying from fossil fuels? Or are we buying from renewables? If we have money to invest and we're investing in the energy stocks, are we investing in fossil fuels or are we investing in renewables? They're going to look at all of it. And we need to understand that so we can make sure that when this is disclosed publicly, we don't look like we're contradicting what we've said in other places. Scope 3 is not in this first set, but it definitely is over here. 1 year later, scope 3, which is all of the extended supply chain, all of your supply base, all of your delivery base, all of your contract manufacturers, they're all scope 3. So now we've got to gather the information from them. So we need some scorecards that tell exactly what it is that we're gathering at these interfaces. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. And what we need to feel really comfortable about, and the SEC is telling us, is that even if the scope 3 comes in and it ends up being fraudulent, because you use the numbers, you are not going to be held liable because you took it in good faith. Now, that's of course, unless we told them to fake the numbers and give them to us. But most of us are not going to be doing that. So we are not held liable for things we cannot control. But we are going to be required to submit all of this information. And for the next tier, it starts all up the next year. And the smallest have 2 years to get their act together because they have the least amount of resources, but they're still expected within 2 years to be able to file these disclosures on climate-related metrics. So we can say, well, you know what? No way the lobbyists in US, they're not going to let this through. No way, ain't going to happen. And you could say, okay, so we're safe, but are we? The EU already has requirements. Many of the countries already have requirements or are implementing requirements that are similar to this. So anywhere we sell around the world, and my small business is global, so I know the businesses you're associated with are also global. We're going to have to fit into this, and we're going to have to be able to provide information. But again, we're being told what to do. We just don't know exactly how to do it because we don't know the definitions and we don't know the exact measurements, and it's all sort of confusing still. So we've got to figure this out pretty quickly here. But there's one more thing you need to know, because this is a big shadow here in the US. We've got all of the disclosure dates up here. The assurance means that you've got a third party auditing. So limited assurance means it may be internal audits at this point in time. And look at this, for the large accelerated filer, it's coming in right on the tail of introducing all of the metrics. So now you've got to be able to provide proof and support data of being able to that what you're showing is actually something that you are collecting and doing and is realistic for your company. And then the next one is reasonable. This is the third party. This is the completely divested from the company. They come in, they're sort of like the KPMGs and the Deloittes, but now of the sustainment world, looking at those metrics, making sure that they can say, yes, you can trust them because they're capturing the risks, they're capturing the metrics. So this is all coming really, really quickly. And I want to ask you, well, what do you think about all the different standards and the goals and the requirements that are coming up? And you'll be able to go right into that poll EV, the exact same one you were in before, and answer this question. And let us know if you have any trouble getting in. Should be at the top of your screen, pollev.com/Cynthia Collin 921. Or you can go into your smartphone, 22333, and it's Cynthia Collin 921. Can't remember if there's a poll EV. All of this stuff from Zoom is in the way. But tell me what you think about all this different stuff that's floating around, trying to help us solve the problems. So I'm hoping that you guys haven't got scared and you're running for cover. But the stuff is coming. And what we're going to do.
So I submitted 2 responses, but they may not
come
coming up in your screen there.
Okay, let me try going back just really quick because I don't want to miss them.
I did too. I put in a couple of comments.
Oh man. Okay, would you mind sharing them with us verbally so that we can hear them?
I mean, my first comment was, is there a way for them all to align with each other so there's not so many that we might have to go out and look at?
Great question.
And I had a couple of comments. My first one was, we need to implement some standards on what to report and when. And my other comment is the question I always ask with these presentations. What's in it for me? We need to educate companies that reporting is a good thing to do and should not be viewed as an extra administrative burden. And I see these as barriers sometimes for certain companies to move forward with this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree 100%. Unfortunately, for those companies with the SEC, it's not going to be optional.
Right. And actually offshore in India, they just passed it where all this will be mandatory like now. They're very desperate. And in fact, there is convergence, by the way, in all these standards and measurements within the finance community. And for example, FASB has been absorbed already. by ISSB, which is a standards board. So there's almost friendly acquisition going on here. It's one thing I've noticed about the sustainability community, those that really are trying to make change happen, particularly in the finance area where they're really sensitive,
Mhm.
is they're trying to be consistent and they're willing to give up turf and be part of versus being separate from someone else competing for mind space. So there's a lot of convergence going on right now. In fact, ISSB is in negotiation with GRI, but FASB has been acquired. And it looks like things are going to come down hard and really fast. And that's been part of the urgency that we've put into our initiative in San Diego. That is, it's not coming down from the top fast enough, but one day soon, bang, the door is going to open up. If you could visualize these, what is it called? Black Friday or the day after Christmas, and sales are going on and faces are plastered up against the glass doors and it's ready to break. Well, guess what? At some point, there's going to be panic and they're going to want a group of professionals to be prepared, but yet from the top down, that it hasn't necessarily come from them. We're going to have to take the initiative so we're not overwhelmed. I hope I'm not making a departure from anything here, but
No, you're not.
that's one of the reasons why we have been very adamant. You've got to learn what the GHG protocol is, water footprint network is, what FASB is, what ISSB is, what GRI is, and what ESG is, and what greenwashing is. And once you get through all that, then you will be prepared. You won't be shocked and you'll be able to rock and roll. But then you also need to learn about SCOR, which is one of the 3 pillars in my mind for an eco-sustainability initiative, that the GHG protocol and whatever. These are the folks that are going to monitor and make decisions. And just by the way, the amount of institutional investor money that is committed to those who are reporting is $102 trillion. Oh no, $112 trillion, $112 trillion. And the buy from those who are part of the Fortune 500 that have committed to all this, their annual buys are at 5 trillion. So I hope I'm not creating any kind of log jam later on in your presentation, but I think people really need to know that, hey, if you're a supply chain professional, independent of what's come down from the top, you're gonna have to get smart on your own or through some other mechanisms like what we're doing at the chapter level here.
I agree. Supply chain has to show up to the table because we make the money for the company. So the material risk is that we don't know enough and we can't put enough in fast enough to be able to satisfy these things, and the company pays the price. So I think you are right on, Preston. I want to go through one more eyes in the sky on us. And this Preston actually did bring to my attention. I really like this group. What it is they figured out how to use the satellites around the globe. And they know that in their organization, they've got top economists and top environmental people and scientists and all sorts of everyone you need to know and modelers and everything else, who can take the database information from the satellites that is ready available. There's no illegal stuff going on here. From the governments, from the researchers, start to model it, start to understand the factors and the causalities of what you see here and what it means a little later. And they can now start to measure greenhouse gases. So yes, if you're running a power plant, they can look at your power plant and figure out how much you've emitted during the year. And yes, that goes for your factory too, because they know how to do this. And yes, they can get down to the ship level. And right now they're working on the trucks. And you can imagine that you've got all this electronic tolling and you've got electronic records. How hard is it going to be to put together what a company's fleet is doing? And if you look at it and pair it with what the SEC wants is, what are you doing in terms of climate change? We can't afford to ruin anything farther because we're in the danger zone already. They could come in and say, we're doing audits. Here's 10 companies. We want to buy the data from you on these 10 companies to compare and see if their reporting is in range with what you're seeing. So that starts then the questioning. And I see a lot more of this sort of stuff going on with the AI, with the advanced technologies and the capabilities that they're giving, and the really smart people who know how to integrate all of these pieces. So there's going to be a lot less greenwashing because we're just not going to be able to get away with it anymore with the level of detail that can be seen. So we've still got to be able to put something in a framework so that we know what we're measuring and how to get it working for us. And that means SCOR has to come into play. And again, Amanda's going to be putting this link into the chat. You're going to be able to go in and look at some additional detail. This is also the registration page, but you'll have more detail on SCOR because I'm just going to give you an overview so you can see how it begins to gather all of these pieces of information that we need and put them into our supply chains in a meaningful way. So the first thing we have are processes. Now, the processes are standardized, and you may be thinking, holy cow, the last thing we need is something that's standardized because then anybody can copy it. Well, again, think of a bunch of Legos. You've got this store-bought set of Legos. They run 100,000 of them. Everybody can buy the same thing, but everybody makes something different out of the Legos because that's what their goal is, to be able to make the Millennium Falcon, the little town in Germany by the Rhine, a dinosaur, whatever it is, same Legos, different end result. So the processes are standardized. We don't say how to run them. We say what they are, and then you figure out how to link them together. And we drive them with standardized metrics. This is how we compare ourselves. And we now have environmental metrics stuffed in here that we can use. And I'll show you this in just a little bit. But none of these are any good if we don't base it in something real. So we use our customer values, what the customers expect from us, the ones that we're serving. How did we promise to serve them? And then we've got our corporate goals, our strategy, our strategic planning. We have to settle both the customer aspects at the same time we're settling and satisfying the strategic aspects of the company. All of these get put together in a way that allow you to do that. And then you add the people and the practices so that you're at the right maturity level in whatever practice or process you're in, and you're driving with the appropriate metrics, because now you're going to bolt them together with the technology and the sustainability. These hold everything in place and really start to stabilize everything. They also give you something additional, that because you're working with your cultural aspects, your strategic planning, the where you're at, because you have different groups of people working with you, the what you believe about sustainability and how you want to integrate it and what's important, as well as all the choices on all the other Legos, you can't copy that. Even if you were the VP and you left the company and went to your competitor, you can't copy it. There's too much that's different. And this is where you build in the strategic advantage, which is part of what we work for in the class, so that you understand how to build the performance, meet the customer expectations, while you're also satisfying the strategic goals and creating competitive value that no one can match. You may have seen some of these level 1 metrics, because it's not enough to say reliable. What does that mean? How do I measure it? Just like in our environmental pieces, how do I measure it? So this means I've got a perfect order to the customer, not in the way I think the customer should expect my perfect order, but in the way the customer is going to rate me on the perfect order. It's a much more difficult way of looking at things. And all three of these customer related attributes have metrics that we start to put together in a way that drive the customer experience, so they get exactly what we're promising them, and they think we're promising them, which means we're fixing our contracts to make sure they're not promising something we shouldn't, and we're fixing our marketing to make sure we're not promising something we shouldn't, because this is what we're capturing, this is what we're measuring ourselves on. These get broken down. I'll show that in a minute, but we also have internal pieces. We can't get rid of costs. We still have asset management. We want to know how efficient we are with our cash, with our labor, with our facilities. So we're looking at those things. And as you know, all 5 of these attributes play all the time in our supply chains. It's not one or the other, it's all. So we look at the prioritization and we practice in the class of making sure we understand what that means and what the trade-offs are, so that when you go back and implement it in your company, you're creating something that the entire supply chain uses and the trade-offs are made the exact same way all the time. So you're not butting heads anymore. You're understanding why the decisions were made the way they were. And if I look at it now in a hierarchical way, because both processes and metrics have that, here I was, that perfect order fulfillment. Well, I would break it down. First of all, I measure each and every order individually. Did I make it yes, or did I make it no? A 0 means no credit. There's not a, well, I got 50% of it done, and so I got a 50%. It's a 1 or a 0. This is a tough metric. And believe me, this is an easier metric than many of the others in SCOR, because it looks at it again from the customer's point of view. If you choose to have all 4 of these level 2s in there and you glitch on any one, does the customer say, oh, don't worry about it? Tell me in the chat, does the customer mind if you mess up part of the order that they're expecting?
Amira said, customer expects 100% quality at all times and reliability in service. Preston said no.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So we look at it from the customer point of view, because then when we get the real metric now off the raw data, no manipulation, we've got something real to build on that the customer is going to reward us for. And we do this on all 5 of those attributes. And as we look at level 3s, we get to pick and choose which ones, level 2s, level 3s, we're going to use. Again, these are all Legos. Do I have to have the 4th reliability level 2? No, not if it doesn't make any sense for my supply chain. I'm putting things together in ways that I run my supply chain and making it real, so that when I mesh the metrics in here with them, then it actually drives the performance that I'm promising. So how do we do this? Because let me tell you, when I went to my first SCOR class, I waited for years for SCOR, because before you couldn't get to it unless your company paid a lot of money and got this big membership, and then they would let some of you be trained. And the companies I worked for never wanted to do that. So I waited and waited. And finally, when ASCM bought SCC, the Supply Chain Council, we got to train as individuals. So I finally got to go and sit in the class and learn SCOR. And I came out of the class more confused than when I went in. And I vowed at that point in time that I would never, ever let someone walk out of my class without being able to implement what they had learned the next day into their company. And so I created this lemonade stand exercise for them. Sounds pretty stupid, right? You know what I'm talking about, the little lemonade stand outside of your house where you've got the little card table and the kids sit at it and you make the lemonade in the kitchen and you take it out and they sell it to anybody who walks by. My gosh, what in the world does that have to do with any of our supply chains? We're global. We've got all of this VAT and tax and everything else that's going on. Well, let me show you what it looks like. This is just part of the mapping out of that little lemonade stand supply chain. Don't try to read it. Let me walk you through it really quick at an upper level. These are all processes. We've chosen what processes we want in this lemonade stand based on our value system and how we want to run it and what we've promised the customer. So we're putting it together, exactly the same things that you'd have to consider in your company. We're stuffing all of these processes with metrics to drive the performance and to be able to diagnose what goes wrong as we are looking at it. So that now, just like we saw in the hierarchy, from the strategic level all the way down to the operational, we can see what's going on at any point in time in real time. We can see what's going on across the entire supply chain because we know how it's hooked together. And this is my engineering coming in. You don't get out of my class unless you're putting in all the electronic data signals as well as all of the product movement signals. So we know how every process is attached to everyone else. And if we go in to do continuous improvement, excellent, but we also know who else we're tweaking so that we can get buy-in from them or have them on the team with us as we go. There's no surprises and all of a sudden, oops, a whole segment of our business doesn't work anymore because we didn't know that was connected. So as we're looking at this and we're seeing the sourcing and the planning and the making and the warehousing on this little bit of a snip of a lemonade stand, you're probably asking, great, that's nice for supply chains, but what about the sustainability stuff? Because, we've still got to deal with that. And that was the whole point of this, right? Well, here they are. They're buried right there in the metrics that we stuff into those processes. It's just part of the day-to-day workings of your supply chain. This is how we operate. This is how we expect you as a supplier to operate because you've got to meet this for us as we come in. And we look at what makes sense for us now and what we want to build to in the future. And it's not a separate initiative that's canceled as soon as cash gets tight, because it's just part of the working part of our supply chain. And now we have a real voice. We are talking now to the CFO saying, this is what we can do with the supply chain. Here's what we're measuring with the supply chain. This is how we get to the greenhouse gas portion in our supply chain, in the level 1, the level 2, and the level 3s, because we've mapped it out. So we've got it in there at this point in time. And you'll learn this in class. So what else would you learn? There are 7 4-hour sessions. Most people have 6 at the most. There's no way you can get reasonable sustainability and the hands-on exercises that you must have in order to master SCOR. Every hour, about 20 minutes of it is hands-on exercises. We've got extra problem solving skills that I put in because there was an implementation understanding. So I took the tools that I use to the most advantage with my clients that they love to use because they get successful results with, and I buried them into the SCOR training, into the racetrack, so that you can implement once you get out and you have those tools to communicate with now the existing SCOR pros, because SCOR is a 6-process framework right now, but in 2 weeks, it's going to be different. And I know this because I was one of the 7 people around the globe who changed it, because we made it so it could handle the real complexities of your supply chains. But the existing SCOR pros talk old SCOR. You're going to learn both languages so that you can talk both ways. Once you learn the initial SCOR, we'll update it with the new SCOR as we go. Plus, there'll be another bonus session for free on the strategic aspects. We can do more with SCOR now because of the way we've reoriented it. There's going to be a free exam prep session. I want you to pass that test. I want you to have those letters behind your name. We'll look at the sustainability regulatory requirements. You know them. A lot of them are regulations anyway. So we're going to bury them right in, and you'll have the initial metrics that you'll be playing with. All right. And so when you go in and you register, you get the tuition, you get the exam, you get the materials, you get the bonuses, you get all the portals. And by the way, on the bonuses for this class, any bonus that I have in the future, you're also going to be able to attend for free because we continue to add on. There'll be additional bonus sessions on SCOR DS. So you're always welcome back. If you're a non-member, choose the non-member button when you go in to register, a non-member of ASCM, and I will make sure that then I buy the membership for you and you just end up getting all of the access. So we're trying to take care of as much as necessary behind the scenes so that all you have to do is come in and learn and master what SCOR is so that you can go out and start eliminating the confusion of all the different frameworks and really start bringing together exactly what it is you want to accomplish. So our pollinator pathways, they did go through SCOR. Everything's bright and sunny. The clouds were lifted. The shadow was banished because now they understand and they have metrics that can show exactly what they're doing, and they can support it with data that's coming right off of how they do the business. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
I think we could unmute now, and people can just talk if they want.
Start. Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
Enjoyed your presentation. I really liked the one slide you had. You kind of rushed through it really quickly. You had what looks like a house of quality from Toyota. We had a roof, you had a bunch of pillars and some foundations.
Yeah,
We
let me go
teach
back.
the house of quality, pardon me?
Let me go back and I'll show it.
Oh, okay. We teach the house of quality as part of the CPIM body of knowledge. There it is. That's it. And I found that intriguing because it shows the relationship of the processes, metrics, and people and practices and so on that support the whole goals and objectives of SCORE, as well as the underlying foundation. So I really like this slide. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Toyota House of Quality. I just like the similarity there. And with your permission, I'd like to steal this and use it.
Sure. Yeah. I created it. So yes, you can do that. And I did create it based on the House of Quality because that is something that I've always used and liked as well. So yes.
By the way,
please.
speaking of stealing your slides, can we get copies of your slides at some point?
Yeah, let me take out the questiony,
Sure.
things so that you're not bugged with them.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I had a question earlier from Dawn, and she was asking when you were talking about asking for questions, they're saying only the largest companies will be ready. She said, will these requirements be passed down to subsidiary companies or only the larger parent company?
I have a feeling nobody is going to be left out.
Yeah, this precedent, I think the GHG protocol says if it's a subsidiary, you have either financial controls or operational controls. Therefore, you're in scope 1 and they have to report scope 2 for that. And then they eventually will have to report for that subsidiary scope 3. So no one escapes the obligation to report. It's coming down quick. And again, that's the catalyst for why we started the initiative. We were waiting for someone else to prepare from, I wouldn't call it the bottom up, but this only expression I can think of, the practitioner who has to deal with this at a detailed level. They need to know what all these things mean and how they interconnect. And it's not happening fast enough. And 2030 is a real time, there's something like a 40 to 50% reduction in GHG emissions required. And the US government is committed, the whole country, to that. So no one escapes. And greenwashing won't be able to occur in the future. In fact, there's a number of companies that were touted as spectacular successes, and they're now looked at as cheats and thieves, and they're being exposed. There are forums right now, very polished forums, with slick communications exposing the phonies. So it's got to be real, or you're just going to be a dinosaur. The company's going to be a dinosaur, just ready to, go extinct. Sorry, didn't mean to get that emotional.
No,
But it's
perfect.
been, a lot of people have been running and hiding for a long time, and that's all over with. That one slide that you showed, which was collusion monitoring, that's amazing science. 50 companies, and they all signed a pledge that not one of them would make a penny off of the things they discovered. And they said, what we're trying to do is instigate innovation, and the marketplace that wants to make money, let them come up with the inventions and the methodologies and all these things to go fix what we discover. But we will not make a penny off of this. And it's amazing. I mean, they've gotten experts. For example, one example in the video they have out there on YouTube is, one way they know a power plant's operating is they'll see ripples in the water. Every power plant has to be cooled. So they need to be near a river or a lake. So the satellites are looking for ripples. Another AI application is looking for smoke. And so they've got all these things figured out. I mean, we got 50 groups of very smart people trying to figure out how to make sure a cheat doesn't get away with it. So interesting times.
Hey everyone, it's Deanna.
Hello.
Cynthia, I don't know if you remember,
I
it's been a long
do.
time since I've seen you. And
It is.
um, I not had a chance to really use SCORE in my previous job, and I just started a new job. So, but SCORE has always been close to my heart with my involvement in SCORE 9, 10, and 11. But I have been watching and eager to see what's going on with SCORE DS. And having SCORE P as a endorsement, do you know what's happening with that? With the SCORE DS, is that going to change anything, or do you know if ACM will eventually make it a certification versus an endorsement?
So some things are not figured out yet. What I do know is that come September, what is it, 18, 19, 20, for
Yeah,
the conference, that's when the switch goes from SCORE version, I don't know, I thought it was
I think
12.5,
it's
I guess
12 or
it's
13 or
13.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's what SCORE P is now with the 6
yeah,
major processes, and it converts over to the update SCORE version 14 that we just finished. And
yeah.
we now have more standard processes because we had to separate things and we had to detail things because there's more complexity.
Yeah, I did see a preview. I think they were asking for just like a beta copy,
Mhm.
um, but I'm looking forward to at the conference the rollout. So I'll be there. But yes,
Excellent.
I am looking forward to supporting the new version and learning more about it. And shout out to San Diego and all you guys are doing for sustainability. And I'm actually from the Houston chapter, but when I see great topics and speakers, I like to join as just an attendee.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. So I just overheard you say that there's the new score coming out after the conference. That'll be version 14.
Yes.
Okay, the current one that's published on the website today is version 12. And we have
Yeah,
our
there's
sustainability website as well right now. So we should look forward to getting version 14. You happen to know when that'll be released for
it'll,
public download?
all the conversions, including all of the portal conversions, should be done during conference. I mean, they're supposed to be ready to go.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
But this is Preston. My understanding is that the core concepts and thought process for SCORE P today will be carried over, meaning that this is enhancing and moving it forward. I mean, I attended a SCORE workshop in 2011, and I'm sure I would recognize 90% of what I would see today.
Yes, you are exactly right. We're not changing how the framework works or how it's put together. We're just adding pieces so that you're able to find your supply chain in there faster, the Legos that you need.
Well, as expected, Cynthia did a fantastic job. I hope a lot of brain cells are rubbing very hard right now with all who attended, and I'm sure when the video gets out to our 2,700 people who are affiliated in some way with us, that happens with them. And I wish, I hope the workshop is incredibly successful. I know it will be from an instruction standpoint, so I would recommend everybody get there if you have aspirations to kind of create a career path to the C-level or anywhere near that level. I think this is the kind of analytical tool framework that you'll need to really master to make that progression. So the marketplace will get wise one of these days soon. I believe that had SCORE been widely adopted, we wouldn't have had as many brutal disruptions. We would have had things that were annoyances and inconveniences, and by and large, we would have done a far better job in stabilizing everything. So, at any rate, thank you again for incredible presentation. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to just sign off by telling people what we'll have for them to attend and participate in just for about another minute or two. Is that okay?
Oh, please do.
We have an events page. We have an eco-sustainability page dedicated. So have a good evening and see you in the near future. Bye-bye.